Dr. King had a dream, and it wasn't just a dream that lived in his head. It was a dream that he spoke, and it was not magic, and it wasn't name it and claim it. Instead, it was entrance into a whole new world, being born into this world. And his words were a powerful part of that entrance. Dr. King's vocalization of the dream, that was creating a container for this thing to begin to happen.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's podcast continues our series on dreaming with our host, Adam Russell. This episode of the Ferment podcast is brought to you by Hardin Coffee, a small batch custom roaster located in the rolling green hills of Kentucky. At Hardin, we believe in locating world-class coffee from around the globe and delivering it to your door fresh and roasted to perfection. We specialize in single-origin coffees as well as seasonal blends. Coffee is communal, coffee is culinary, coffee is art. Visit us today at hardincoffee.com.
Hi, everyone. This is Melissa Keller, Events Director for Vineyard Worship. I wanted to take a minute to invite you to our upcoming Worship Leaders Retreat in Cannon Beach, Oregon, February 19th through the 22nd. This retreat is for anyone who is involved in worship ministry. Join us for a time of rest and encouragement with extended times of worship and personal ministry on the beautiful Oregon coast. If you've never been to one of our retreats, use the promo code FERMENT and get 30% off your registration. For more information, visit our website at vineyardworship.com/events. Hope to see you there.
What up, everybody? My name is Adam Russell, and you are listening to the Ferment podcast. This is part 2 of a 4-part series, a special series on dreaming. And listen, we're doing that because it's January. It's a brand new year, and some of us are looking for ways to reorient our lives. Or maybe you're not really a New Year's resolution person, but you know what? You just know it's time to reconsider who it is that you are and what you're doing. And, well, here's one of the things I've learned over the years. There'll be a few moments in your life that require a really bold move. You know, your life and my life, it's this really odd thing. It's the culmination of like the activity of God in our life, like the sovereign, active activity of the Spirit in our life. And then it's also the culmination of all the choices that we make, the daily one foot in front of the other decisions that we've been making for many, many years. And one of the things I've realized over the years, that our ability to access the choices that we've made or the culmination of our life or the active work of the Spirit in our life, sometimes our ability to access that is going to come down to our ability to dream. Like some of the things that God is wanting to do in us, to us, through us, and in the world, part of the way that we enter into that, whatever that is, it's almost like dreaming is the doorway into that, if that makes sense. And so dreaming's a really big deal. Now, last time we mostly talked about having the freedom to dream. That's always the first step, you know? The beginning of being a dreamer is feeling like you have permission to dream. Not only permission, but knowing that you have the ability to dream. Knowing that being a dreamer is, well, it's not a special class of person, you know? You don't have to be LeBron James. You don't have to be Elon Musk. You don't have to look to be the person who's wanting to send rockets into outer space or dig tunnels under Los Angeles to be a dreamer and to give your life like a core, a definition, and a direction. The truth is, we were all born with the ability, and we've been given divine permission to live from our hearts in this manner. So, what's next? If you feel like you have permission, if you're coming to some sort of a realization that you have the ability, that part of what it means to be a person is to be a dreamer, what's next? Well, after you start dreaming, the next step is to start speaking that dream. Even in the scriptures, God didn't simply have a dream. Instead, he spoke it. He spoke it. God didn't snap his fingers to make light, and he didn't think it into existence, right? He dreamed it, and then he spoke it. Now, there's something about speech. One of the things I've noticed anyway, there's something about speech that is deeply connected to the dreaming heart. One way you begin to give life to a dream is you begin to talk about it. It's the beginning of a thing coming into the world. It's the beginning of a thing leaving the arena of non-existence and entering into being. This is why, theologically speaking, this is why Jesus is the Word of God. Jesus is God spoken into the world. In Christian thought, there's this acute awareness that words are a part of the creative process. And let me just say here as well, because I know, some of you are listening and you're already beginning to think, okay, I'm going to dream, then we're going to speak a dream, and that's really important. And some of us are thinking, well, this sounds like magic. Or some of us might also be thinking like, this sounds like name it and claim it theology or something like that. Well, here's what I want you to know. This is not magic, and this is not a name it and claim it theological worldview. In my view anyway, or in my estimation, those are counterfeits to the real thing. I mean, both of those exist because this other thing actually exists. And both of those counterfeits are false, mostly because they, in some profound way, are trying to short circuit entering into the process of creation. One way of understanding magic would be this. Magic is, trying to exert control apart from the Holy Spirit. Magic is trying to exert some sort of influence apart from cooperating with the Spirit's influence, either in my life or in someone else's life. Trying to make someone else vulnerable to my agenda, right? And certain name it and claim it approaches are attempting to make God do something, right? Trying to hold God accountable to some perceived rule. Basically, a lot of that is just what my wife and I call Christian voodoo. It's like if I just get the words right, then I can hold God accountable to some theological premise that he's apparently put into the world. And then all of a sudden, I'm in this scenario where one has to question, who is God? Is God God or is God me? That's the problem with a lot of these things. But what I'm really trying to say is that part of our creative capacity is rooted in the reality that God has formed the world in a particular manner. And part of that flow is that dreams produce words and speech, and that words produce new worlds. And here's part of what I want us to understand that maybe is different from what I'm talking about to some of these other things. None of what I'm talking about gets a person out of the process. None of it's a short circuit. None of it's the easy way. Like you can't speak a dream and avoid the process. You can't speak a dream and make God do something that excludes you from the process of like embodying that thing. In fact, speaking a dream or beginning to live out a dream that comes from the heart, it usually baptizes one into the very depths of difficulty and testing. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It usually puts us right into the depths of difficulty and testing. One way of thinking about this is that, well, it's just the idea that Christianity is incarnation. It's incarnational. It's entering into the story. It's not avoiding the story. It's not avoiding the processes. It's entering into the story, and it's doing so in the deepest way possible, with flesh and blood. One of the perfect examples of this would be Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King had a dream. And it wasn't just a dream that lived in his head. It was a dream that he spoke. And it was not magic, and it wasn't name it and claim it. Instead, it was entrance into a whole new world, being born into this world. And his words were a powerful part of that entrance. It was a whole new existence being born into this world. And it was happening, at least initially, in some very profound way. It was happening with words, not just words alone. Obviously, there were actions, there were sit-ins, there were all of these incarnational ways of being. But it was Dr. King's vocalization of the dream, the thing that was in his heart, that was in some ways, creating a container for this thing to begin to happen. And it was a dream that was more than words. And if you know the story, of course, you probably do. It ultimately cost Dr. King everything. Now, in a much less epic way, we all know that people talk about the things they get excited about. Some of you might be thinking, well, okay, I have a dream. Maybe I can speak it, but I'm certainly not Dr. King. I'm not even sure that my dream is like that epic. I'm not sure that I'm the container or I'm the vessel for that sort of like epic cultural shift. And I just want you to know, you don't have to be Dr. King. You don't have to be this epic, culturally shifting dreamer. That is totally fine. In fact, most of us won't be. But one of the things I've noticed in a far less epic way is that people just, we just tend to talk about this stuff that we're excited about, Entrepreneurs talk about their new businesses. Couples talk about their new pregnancies. Dreamers talk about the next new thing. And that's a really good thing. It's good to begin to speak it and begin to see it break into the present, or to break into this world, to break out of the world that lives in your heart or in your mind and begin to break it to this world. Well, some of us might be thinking, okay, this is cool, but what's actually happening? Well, let me just demystify here for a moment. I have a few things I want to share about possibly what is happening when we speak dreams. I know for me, anyway, when I'm speaking a dream, it's one way of sort of like seeing if the dream is any good. Now, I know this is somewhat personal to me, but it's probably true of a lot of you all as well. I'm an external processor. Like, I can't even tell if I like an idea until I've talked about it with some other people. I'm sure there's some other external processors out there. Well, one of the ways that you begin to just deal with something, or even determine if you like it, or determine how you might shape that idea, is you just begin to speak it. And at the same time, I know there's a lot of internal processors out there. Well, I want to encourage you to speak your dream. It's a really great way of getting that thing out of your head. Some of us just live in our heads so much. And I'm talking directly to you, all you Enneagram 5s out there. You got to begin to say something, get out of that, like that little closeted place where everything is just like information in, and it's time to begin to put something back out. It's a great way of just beginning to put something back out into the world. Now, here's something that I've noticed over the years. I've actually sat with people who have carried dreams for decades and never spoken about them. I'm a pastor. People come and see me sometimes. And sometimes we end up having conversations that are like really different than the reason that person initially came. And occasionally I end up having a conversation with someone that was supposed to be about this or that, but then ends up being about maybe the dream that lives in their heart, or the thing they feel called to do, or the thing that they'd been wanting to do. And I can honestly tell you that many, many times in my office, I've sat with people who have carried words and have carried dreams in their hearts for years, but had never vocalized them, had never told anyone. I've also sat with husbands and wives who were married for more than 20 years, where one partner had carried a dream in their heart that the other didn't know about. What that tells me is that, well, it tells me that we sort of internally know the significance of speaking something. We know. It's the reason someone would hold back. It's the reason why they might be a little afraid to say it. It's the reason why we might hide, because we know that speaking is a real way of bringing something into the world. So it's one way I just determine if I even like the dream or the thing I'm talking about. But it's also, secondly, speaking the dream is a really great way to determine if the dream has legs. It's a way for us to determine if it's compelling to other people. It's a way for us to determine if others can see what I'm seeing, or if other people can begin to believe what it is that I'm believing. And then thirdly, Speaking the dream is a really great way to begin taking ownership. That's the other thing. There's a certain level of accountability to it. I mean, it's not super high accountability, and that's good because we might be articulating the thing that's in our heart poorly. That's almost always the case with me. I will feel something before I can really say what it is, and I actually have to say it a few times in order to begin to hone in on the thing that I'm actually feeling. But there is a certain amount of accountability to it. There's a bit of ownership that comes with speaking. To go back to Genesis again, I think this is the reason that God has Adam name all the animals. Whatever you name, you own, right? How many of you had a dog when you were a kid? Yeah, if you name the dog, you own it. You're responsible for it. If you name the thing, you own it and you're responsible for it. You name the company, you give it a title, you put up the sign, you own it, you're responsible for it. And speaking a dream is a beginning of us naming it and in some way taking responsibility for it. And just like the light spoken into the darkness of Genesis, when I'm speaking a dream, I'm looking for the lights to come on in me, and I'm looking for the lights to come on in other people. This is why we do it. This is what's happening. All right. So what do we do? Or how do we do this? A couple things really quickly. First off, we do this naturally. And I guess all I mean by that is you don't have to shout it from the peak of Mount Everest, you know? You don't have to hire a film crew. You just share what's on your heart with people that you love and trust. Maybe it's just a few people. And then you just keep talking as the doors open. Here's another thing I've learned about being a creator or living from a dream. I've learned that the numbers of consumers is huge. It's almost limitless. But I've learned that the number of producers is actually pretty small. Meaning that as soon as you start working on a dream, even if it's just you've held the dream in your head and heart and now you're beginning to talk about it, and so you're taking some level of ownership over that thing, to even speak about it begins to send a person out of that massive pool of consumers, and you're beginning to wade into the waters of producers, which is much, much smaller. And then as doors open, and they will, because people tend to find one another when you start doing things, then you begin to speak it with them and you allow for the refinement and the learning to become a process in the conversation. Obviously, there's more here, but I'm trying to keep this fairly brief. So what do we do? If you have a dream, it's time to speak it. And I just want to say this as well. The best place to begin speaking your dream is in prayer. Begin to speak the dream that God gave you back to Him in prayer. Let it be the first place that the words are formed. And then you share it with loved ones. And then you share it whenever the doors are open with people who may be open for what you're thinking about. Then you try and find other people who are on that same path. This is ultimately the benefit of things like conferences or events. It's meeting people on a similar path. And it doesn't have to be epic. I just want to highlight that again. It doesn't have to be epic. You don't have to be epic. I'm talking about the dream and the speaking. Neither the dream nor the speaking has to be epic. You don't have to be Moses on the mountain. You don't have to be Dr. King. You can be you wherever you are. But if you have a dream, you're going to need to share it. And the first way to do that is in conversation. All right, guys. All right, gals. That's part 2. Peace.
Hey, everybody. This is Casey Corum, the producer of the Ferment podcast. Thanks for listening. I got a couple quick things for you. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. We've got a bunch of exciting shows coming up, and we don't want you to miss a thing. So, on social media, you can find us on Instagram at the Ferment Podcast, and on Twitter, you can find us at FermentCast. Please let us know what you think of the podcast by leaving a review on iTunes. All right, see you next time. Peace.